Welcome to another episode of DREADlines. You might be thinking, what is DREADlines if you're tuning in for the first time? Well, what DREADlines is it's not breaking news, but rather it's a discussion and high-level overview of all these crazy stories that have like a true crime element-ish to it, and they're making the headlines, but we call them DREADlines because they're usually always about dreadful topics. So DREADlines is me just walking you through these headline stories, but it is not breaking news, all right? So the story that we're going to cover today, this is, all started, I don't know, maybe a month ago, maybe longer. Actually, it started longer, but it is a wild story and I cannot wait to get into it. But before I do, let me introduce myself. If you don't know who I am, I'm Jami Rice. I am a full-time true crime podcaster. I have 3 podcasts at the moment: Murderish, Lipstick and Lies, Dirty Money Moves, Women in White Collar Crime. And I am a full-time podcaster, content creator. I live in the Los Angeles area and I have 3 kids. I have a grandbaby. And I am absolutely obsessed with true crime content. I binge watch all the things, all the documentaries, podcasts. Obviously, I work in true crime now as a full-time podcaster, but I'm also obsessed with things like reality TV, skincare, those types of things. So a lot of my content surrounds that. But make sure if you are into those types of things and you're into these headline-making stories and you want somebody to sort of break them down in like a Cliff's Notes version for you, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit the subscribe button right now, like, comment on this. And if you want to listen to these stories in audio version only, then you can subscribe to my podcast, Murderish, because all of these DREADlines with Jami episodes live on the Murderish podcast feed. So you can get them on my YouTube channel or on Murderish, the podcast. All right, you guys, let's get into it. We are going to be covering the Blake Lively versus Justin Baldoni of it all, and the film It Ends With Us, which really should be called It Never Ends With Us, because this shit is an ongoing feud between the two of these people. And it seems like new information is coming out every single day and is really hard to keep up with, but I have done my best, and I'm going to present to you today all that has happened, like the high-level overview, but I am going to get into the weeds a little bit of what's going on. But before you roll your eyes at the fact that I'm covering this story, because honestly, I think a lot of people are just fatigued at this point because they're just sick and tired of these two, privileged actors going at each other. I felt that way during part of this as well. But when you really learn the details of these cases, this is dark. This is very dark because no matter which side you're on or what take, you're going to look at this from, what angle you're going to look at this from. For example, if Blake Lively is telling the truth, then this is very dark. You've got an actor who co-starred in this movie, It Ends With Us, who is, a self-proclaimed feminist and a domestic. He did this movie partly because he wants to raise awareness for domestic violence, which is a great cause, and he wants to amplify domestic violence survivors' stories. You've got him saying and, portraying himself that way, but if Blake Lively's telling the truth, then he is a horrible, horrible guy because he allegedly sexually harassed her, executed this crazy smear campaign to basically end her. So from that angle, it's extremely dark. But if he's telling the truth, then you've got Blake Lively over here completely hijacking his baby, his project that he has worked so hard to bring to light, and for good reason, according to him. And that's diabolical. That's diabolical. And that she's the one exacting this horrible smear campaign against a completely innocent man who brought her onto this project. And it's sort of like his baby and his, him wanting to amplify survivor, stories. So if he's telling the truth, then it's also dark. And maybe her husband Ryan's in on it too. And we're going to get into that. So that is why I find this story interesting. And that is why we're covering it here on DREADlines. And also it's viral. Like this thing is really taking over the headlines and people are just obsessed with it. So without further ado, let's get into it. And we're calling this It Never Ends with us. Okay, so this story involves Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. They are co-stars in the film adaptation of the novel It Ends With Us, which was it was authored by Colleen Hoover. And Blake Lively is an American actress, daughter of an actor, Ernie Lively. Her breakthrough role was Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. She also starred in Gossip Girl. She's married to actor Ryan Reynolds, who, now that he's done Deadpool, apparently is a very big deal. I say apparently because a little bit of background, like I don't watch a lot of movies these days. I'm more of like a documentary girl. So I didn't really know much about Ryan and Blake before this, other than a few what I would call problematic details. And we'll get into that. And I didn't know at all who Justin Baldoni was. So these people are all somewhat new to me, but I also don't fangirl over celebrities. And I'm not saying that because I'm a cool girl and I'm just above it. I say that because these people will inevitably disappoint you. Like if you fangirl too hard over anybody, it could be a celebrity or a non-celebrity, a politician, a religious figure, anything, the president, it truly could bite you in the ass because these people are people. They're human beings. They're flawed. They're complex. They will inevitably make mistakes, big and small, and they will disappoint you. And that may be going on with some people who were fangirls of any of these three famous people that are involved in this story. So I don't really fangirl over really anybody because we're all just base level. Like we're all the same, in my opinion, as far as you're human, I'm human. We're all just trying to survive and nourish our families and take care of our loved ones and do all the things. But there are people who are outside of that, right? There are like shit people who are sociopaths and just trash humans. And then there are people who are extra great human beings, right? And they just kind of go above and beyond. But a little background, like these people are kind of new to me, long story short. Then you have Justin Baldoni. He's also an American actor, director, best known for his role on the CW telenovela Jane the Virgin. He also co-starred in the film and directed It Ends With Us with Blake Lively, which is the subject of this story. He's also the co-chair of Wayfarer Studios, who also played a big role in the film It Ends With Us. Wayfarer Studios bought the rights to the novel that Colleen Hoover wrote and co-financed the film It Ends With Us. So those are the players in this story. Okay, let's get into kind of a high-level timeline of when things went down, and then we'll get into the weeds a little bit on those events that happened. In 2019, Justin Baldoni's production company, Wayfarer Studios, acquired the rights to adapt It Ends With Us, the book by Colleen Hoover, into film. Baldoni signs on as director and co-star playing Ryle Kincaid. January 2023, Blake Lively is announced as the film's lead, Lily Bloom, and the co-executive producer of the film. March to June of 2023, production takes place in New Jersey, but production is briefly halted during the writers' strike. So there was this whole strike that happened that kind of halted production for a while. They got back at it shortly after that, and on August 6th of 2024, this is the next year, the film premieres in New York City, but fans notice that Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni avoid each other. They don't pose together in photos. They don't do press together for the movies, which is odd. They're co-stars of this film. Usually you see them, in interviews together, posing together, and doing all the things together. So people started to talk. There was, I guess, some, and I don't remember any of this. This is not when I caught wind of the drama. But some people were clocking it pretty early on that like, hey, they're kind of avoiding each other. They're the co-stars don't seem to be following each other on social media. They're not posing together and all these things. Also, fans start to notice on social media that cast members of the film and Colleen Hoover, the book author, are not following Justin Baldoni on social media. And that's odd because almost from the moment I leave, like if I collab with another podcaster for the first time and we hit it off, and we kind of work closely together on something, you better believe I'm going to follow them right away, and they're probably going to follow me back. And then we're going to, engage with each other on social media. We're going to like each other's pictures, comment. But to not be following the co-star that you worked with for probably a couple years on this film, or a year or however long it was, that's odd. So people started to talk at that point. But again, that's not when I really clocked that something was wrong with all of this or that their drama was brewing. Then August 7th, 2024. So this is the day after the film premieres in New York City. Justin Baldoni hires crisis PR pro Melissa Nathan, which only fueled public curiosity about a potential conflict between the co-stars, Baldoni and Lively. Now, Melissa Nathan previously worked for Johnny Depp in what I would call a smear campaign against Amber Heard. Now, I don't know all the details in that, but certainly he hired Melissa Nathan to make himself at least look good in his battle against Amber Heard. So she did that. And now here she is being hired by Justin Baldoni because something's going on that makes him want to hire a crisis PR person. Now, this is sort of when Blake Lively starts to say, like, wait, Justin Baldoni hired this PR team specifically to smear me and to make my name, to discredit my name and to just really end me in the public eye. But Baldoni says that he hired the crisis PR team because there were concerns about potential negative publicity surrounding the release of his film, particularly amidst the alleged behind-the-scenes tensions with co-star Blake Lively. People were talking. So leading up to Justin Baldoni hiring a PR team, people were already talking, and there was already some things that people were concerned about. Specifically, Sony became concerned at some point. I guess, TMZ or somebody in the press caught a photo of Blake on set wearing this like horrendous outfit that everybody made fun of, and it just didn't make her or the film looked good, and it kind of made a mockery of the film, I think. And so Sony expressed concerns, during filming. Then you've got Lively and Justin not posing together, not following each other and all that. So there was something brewing, and Justin knew it. And there's probably some things that we're going to learn about exactly what that was. But Justin says, no, I didn't hire a PR team to smear Blake Lively. Sorry, babe, it's not about you. Those are my words, not his. He's saying there was shit going on. And I was afraid that I was going to be smeared. Like, I was afraid that this was all going to come down on me, and I didn't want that to happen. So I leveled a defense, or I hired a protection team, let's say. Then on August 15th, 2024, Blake's previous interview with journalist, I think her name is Kirsty Flaw, I'm probably saying that wrong, resurfaces. This is when I started to notice that people were sort of canceling Blake Lively, or at least talking about her on social media and not in a good light. Basically, she was getting the mean girl edit. Like, people were just like, ew, look at her interview. She's a mean girl. She's entitled. She's a brat. She's rude. She's downright like mean, bullying, like all these things. So on August 15th, after Justin hires his PR team, this previous interview airs of Blake, and it starts to resurface. And it's with journalist Kirsty Flaw, I think that's her name. And it doesn't make Blake look good at all. And I think you all have seen this by now, and we'll play a clip of it here.
Well, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
You've got two nice ones.
They are kind of bumps, aren't they?
No, not bumps. The lovely lady lumps. Check it out.
Amid criticism surrounding Blake Lively, a Norwegian journalist, Kirsty Flaw, posted a clip of a 2016 interview with Blake Lively, which Flaw says made her want to quit her job because the interview was so uncomfortable and so mean-spirited. This is like coming from Flaw. Like, she just thought Blake Lively was so mean to her that she just felt kind of beaten down and wanted to quit her job. The sit-down interview was in promotion of Blake Lively's film Cafe Society, directed by Woody Allen, which we're going to get into him later, but not a fan. So it's directed by Woody Allen, and Lively in this interview was accompanied by her co-star Parker Posey. In the now viral interview, and it has gone viral, Flaw titled the video, "The Blake Lively Interview That Made Me Want to Quit My Job." And this interview clip starts to resurface, and everybody on social media is like, F Blake Lively, she's a mean girl, and so is Parker Posey. I've seen the interview, and basically the way I describe it is the interviewer, Flaw, began the interview by congratulating Blake, who had already announced that she was pregnant with one of her children. And the interviewer says, oh, congrats, before we get started, like, congrats on your little bump. And she called it a little bump. Now, Blake was far enough along where it was like obvious she was pregnant. And also she had previously, like, she had made it public. Like, everybody knew she was pregnant. This was not a secret. And then Blake responds immediately and looks at Flaw and says, congratulations on your little bump. And the only problem with that is that Flaw was not pregnant. And it came out later that Flaw had also been struggling with fertility issues. So this was a really sensitive topic for her. Not that Blake knew that, but it was a weird, rude response. Like Flaw, in my opinion, in the video was really just trying to open things up like, oh, congratulations. But instead of saying something more politically correct, like, oh, congratulations on your pregnancy, she said, congratulations on your little bump. And Blake fired back and said, congratulations on your little bump. And it was icky, in my opinion. It was rude. It was awkward. It was cringy, uncalled for. But I don't know what was going through Blake's mind, and I don't know how she would defend that, but it was icky. And in speaking about the film, the journalist continues the interview, and she said she found it visually amazing and asked whether Lively and Posey enjoyed the fashion in the film, which played actually a big role in the film, which was set in the 1930s. Lively at this point wouldn't even look at the interviewer. She's only looking at Parker Posey, her co-star, and addressing her. She won't address the interviewer. And Parker Posey's like sitting over here. So Blake's literally like talking to Parker, and the interviewer's like somewhere over here. And the interviewer's just sitting there like, is she gonna address me? Like, this is weird. And instead she looks at Parker Posey and she says something like, I wonder if they would ask the men that same question. And so she's calling the interviewer out for daring to ask these co-stars a question about fashion when, the interviewer probably would never ask the men about fashion. I don't know. It was cringy. You could argue on either side of that, whatever. But I just thought to me, it was Blake and Parker as well look like mean girls, and they didn't want to be there, and it showed, and they just wouldn't even fuck with this interviewer. Like they're just like, F her, we're just going to talk to each other the whole time. And it was rude. Post-film premiere, TMZ reports allegations of Baldoni making Blake Lively uncomfortable during filming, including inappropriate behavior during a kissing scene and a comment about her weight. So this is when reports start to surface that like, there were problems on set, and it looks like Justin Baldoni's the bad guy because Lively's saying he made her uncomfortable during scenes and made comments. He body shamed me, talked about my weight. This is when, like, again, I became aware of like, oh, I guess there's issues on this film that I've never seen. Then August to October of 2024, It Ends With Us achieves box office success. And I've heard now a million different reports said something like the film cost $25 million to make, but it grossed like $350 million thus far. So that's a huge financial success. September of 2024, backlash arises over marketing strategies, including tone-deaf promotions for a film depicting domestic violence. So the film is heavily about domestic violence. Now, again, full disclosure, I have not watched the film, but from what I've read, the film is about Lily Bloom, and she gets into a relationship with this, I think he's a surgeon, Ryle Kincaid, and it ends up being abusive. So there is a dark, tone to the film. It's got a very serious message. However, the issue was the marketing strategies that they're talking about that were tone deaf were centered around Blake Lively because people saw basically she was promoting her husband and her alcohol brands, her hair products during, when she's supposed to be talking about domestic violence in this film. And she's keeping the conversation really light and fluffy. She's like, hey, grab your girls, grab your floral outfits and go see the film, girls. Like, when in reality, like this, we need to address the uncomfy part of it, which is domestic violence. That's what this film was about. And apparently Justin made this film because he wanted to highlight survivor stories and really amplify the conversations around domestic violence. But Blake Lively, in her marketing for it, she was talking about everything but domestic violence, including her hair care products and her husband's alcohol brand. So there were issues with that. It came off as tone deaf, not good. Then December 9th of 2024, It Ends With Us begins streaming on Netflix. And around that same time, Baldoni actually received an award at the Vital Voices event celebrating men who elevate women. Baldoni was awarded the 2024 Voices of Solidarity Award from Vital Voices, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ending sexual and domestic violence. However, that reward was later rescinded by that organization when all this stuff came out, when all the allegations from Blake Lively against Justin Baldoni came out. So that's interesting. December 21st, 2024, this is when the bomb dropped. Like, this was the atom bomb in this war of these two celebrities, maybe three celebrities, maybe four. God, we're going to get into it. December 21st, 2024, the New York Times article was published, and it was titled, "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." And this New York Times article was the first to expose details of a legal complaint that later turned into a lawsuit, but a legal complaint that Blake Lively filed against Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer Studios, alleging sexual harassment, toxic work environment, and a retaliatory smear campaign against Blake Lively. So this is when like the shit hit the fan and everybody's like, oh my gosh. You read that article and it just gives you all the receipts that Blake Lively is coming forward with. Like, there were text messages between the two of them included in there, text messages between Justin Baldoni and his publicist and his PR team. Like, all these supposed like receipts were included in this legal complaint. But it's important to note that Blake Lively initially filed a complaint, which is not a lawsuit. And we'll get into the nuance of that and maybe what may have been behind that decision not to file a lawsuit, but just do the complaint, file the complaint. December 22nd, 2024, the New York Times article alleges that there was a PR campaign orchestrated to bury Blake Lively. Private text messages obtained by the New York Times appear to show an intentional attempt to bury Blake Lively. So at this point, it's not looking good for Justin Baldoni. And I remember thinking, like, after I read the complaint, this is not good. And he is a shit person. My instincts are always to believe women. Okay. I have also, not to make it about me, but just we all have our stories, but I have also been on the receiving end of severe sexual harassment more than once. I worked in corporate for 20 years and I can tell you some stories. And I know so many women who have similar or even worse stories. And even to go a step further, I mean, violence against women is an epidemic in this world, not just in this country, but in this world. So I know it exists. And unfortunately, it exists on a large scale. So my gut instinct is always like, my knee-jerk instinct is to believe women. So I believed Blake Lively and I was squarely team Blake Lively when all these details came out in her complaint against Justin Baldoni. And I would say the public sentiment at that time was also like, oh shit, but Justin Baldoni is not a feminist. He's trash. Like, that's, I think people in the public eye were like, no, he's lying. He's not a feminist. He mistreats women. That's what a lot of people were thinking at this time. Then there are serious ramifications for this complaint and this New York Times article, because in December of 2024, Baldoni is dropped by his talent agency, WME, which also represents Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, her husband, two major celebrities. I also think that there is a tie to Taylor Swift here, and we're going to get into her later. But if I'm not mistaken, T Swift is also represented by WME. But they dropped Baldoni amid all these headlines coming out in this New York Times article coming out, painting him as a bad person. And there was some speculation at that time and also to this day, like going on now, that WME essentially kept the bigger fish, right? So like if they represent all these major stars, Ryan Reynolds, Blake Lively, and then they've got Justin Baldoni, well, he arguably is the lesser of the stars. And if these stars are battling each other, who are we going to keep? We're going to keep the bigger fish. So they kept Blake and Ryan probably, and dropped Justin. There was like some speculation that they just decided to keep the bigger fish. Okay, so we keep talking about this complaint. So on December 20th of 2024, which is right around the same time that New York Times article came out, which detailed a lot of what was in this complaint. So December 20th, 2024, Blake Lively files a complaint, not a lawsuit, with the California Civil Rights Department. And the legal complaint filed by Blake Lively against Wayfarer Studios and other associated parties, again, like I said, it was filed with the California Civil Rights Department. It's not a lawsuit. The individuals named are Blake Lively, she's the plaintiff, Justin Baldoni, he's the director-producer of the film It Ends With Us. Also named was Jami Heath, the CEO of Wayfarer Studios. Ryan Reynolds was named in this complaint, but as Blake Lively's representative, he's also her husband. And also named are Melissa Nathan, she's the PR consultant from the agency group PR LLC. And like I said earlier, she previously worked for Johnny Depp. Also named is Jennifer Abel. She is the publicist for Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni. Steve Sarowitz, he's the co-founder and financier of Wayfarer Studios. He's also named in the complaint, as well as some Sony representatives, including Angie Giannetti, who oversaw distribution for the film It Ends With Us. Also named in this complaint are Alex Sachs and Todd Black. They are producers on the film It Ends With Us. Now, the key issues of this complaint include inappropriate conduct, hostile work environment, failure to investigate complaints, a retaliation campaign against Blake Lively, as well as contract breaches. Now, let me get into each of those just a little bit. So on the topic of inappropriate conduct, one of the issues that Blake Lively highlights in her complaint, she says that unprofessional and invasive behavior by Justin Baldoni and Jami Heath, who's the CEO of Wayfarer and the lead producer of the film. She says there was a hostile work environment, which she says there was misconduct, such as unauthorized nudity demands, improvised intimate scenes, and comments on Blake's physical appearance, her weight specifically. She also says that there was a failure to investigate her complaints. She claims that Wayfarer did not address harassment reports or implement workplace safety measures. She also says there was a retaliation campaign against her. She says that there was a coordinated effort by the defendants to harm Blake Lively's reputation through social manipulation and astroturfing campaigns. Now, astroturfing is basically a campaign or message that appears to be naturally occurring, but they're actually being defined by a company. One example might be a targeted smear campaign that's made to look like it's just happening organically, right? Like nobody's behind it, but in actuality, it's being orchestrated by someone or certain people or organizations. Blake also says there were contract breaches, violations of agreed upon terms meant to ensure workplace safety and proper handling of intimate scenes during production. So these are the main complaints that she's highlighting in her legal complaint. Now, according to Blake Lively's complaint, here is a little bit of a timeline in her complaint against Justin Baldoni, Wayfarer, Jami Heath, and all the other people we mentioned earlier. May to June of 2023, Blake Lively's complaint highlights that there was a production halt. The production of It Ends With Us began in May of 2023, but it was suspended in mid-June 2023 due to the Writers Guild of America strike. Allegations of unprofessional conduct occurred during production. The complaint alleges that there was unprofessional conduct occurring during the production period before the strike. The complaint also says that November of 2023, there was a return to production, so a return to filming. And the complaint says that on November 9th of 2023, Lively's attorneys sent a document titled Protections for Return to Production to Wayfarer. So there's been much been made of this, protections letter, what's it called? The Protections for Return to Production. Lively is saying her attorney sent this document to Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer and all the people that she's named in her complaint. And it was sort of like a 17-point list of these things need to be in place in order for me, Blake Lively, to return to the set and feel safe. January 4th, 2024, Blake Lively's complaint says there was an all-hands meeting. And the meeting included Justin Baldoni, Jami Heath, Blake Lively, her husband Ryan Reynolds as her representative, and other producers on the film. The meeting addressed inappropriate behaviors on set and established guidelines to ensure safety. The complaint also says in the summer of 2024, there was a retaliation campaign exacted against Blake Lively. The complaint alleges that there were efforts by Justin Baldoni, Jami Heath, and others to damage Blake Lively's reputation through digital campaigns. And this occurred leading up to and after the film's release in August of 2024. Now, let's get into the details of the alleged misconduct that Blake Lively is saying in her complaint that Justin Baldoni did. Like, this is what she's accusing him of. So Justin Baldoni in her complaint is described as the director, executive producer, and co-chairman of Wayfarer Studios. It's alleging that he engaged in unprofessional behavior, including improvising intimate scenes without consent, commenting on Blake Lively's appearance, and invading her privacy. She says that Baldoni sent text messages expressing dissatisfaction with his PR firm's crisis management strategies, stating that he wanted to feel like Blake Lively could be buried. The complaint alleges that Jami Heath, the CEO of Wayfarer Studios and lead producer, allegedly played inappropriate videos to Blake Lively, including one of his wife giving birth without her consent. She also says that Jami Heath entered her trailer uninvited while she was topless, insisting on having a conversation with her despite her discomfort. The complaint alleges there were text messages and internal communications, specifically messages between Justin Baldoni, Jami Heath, and PR consultants Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel, that reveal discussions about strategies to execute a negative press campaign about Blake Lively. And I'll give examples of those text messages in just a bit. Okay, so the allegations of the supposed retaliation efforts against Blake. Blake's complaint claims that after she raised concerns about a hostile work environment on the film, Wayfarer, led by Justin Baldoni and Jami Heath, launched a retaliatory campaign. So she's saying, hey, I made complaints that were valid. They didn't listen. And in fact, they punished me by launching this negative press campaign against me in retaliation for me outcrying about sexual harassment and other misconduct. Lively's complaint says there was a social manipulation plan involved, including fake online narratives, astroturfing, amplification of negative stories about Blake Lively, a coordinated PR effort to protect Justin Baldoni's image and discredit Blake Lively's. And she says the alleged retaliation continued during the film's promotional period in the summer of 2024. So after this film was released, or as it was about to be released, I guess. Summer of 2024. I don't know. I think that's when the film already was released. Yeah, because it was released in August. Okay, so more about the alleged inappropriate and retaliatory text messages that are included in Blake's complaint. So Blake Lively's complaint reveals a text message that Baldoni sent to about PR strategy and his desire for an aggressive approach to counter negative press about him and target Lively. So in one text message that Baldoni sent, which is highlighted in the legal complaint filed by Blake, says that, quote, "Not in love with the document they sent. Not sure I'm feeling the protection I felt on the call," unquote. And Baldoni expressed concerns that the PR strategy lacked a sufficient defense and suggested he wanted more aggressive measures to protect himself. Melissa Nathan, the PR consultant, assured Jennifer Abel, Baldoni's publicist, about their capability to harm Lively's reputation. So there's another text message that Melissa Nathan sent to Jennifer Abel that says, quote, "You know we can bury anyone, but I can't write that to him," unquote. In a separate text exchange, Nathan clarified the need to avoid written communication explicitly mentioning retaliatory intentions. In that text message, which is included in Blake's complaint, Melissa Nathan says, "We can't write it down to him. We can't write, we will destroy her." Jennifer Abel responds, "He wants to feel like she can be buried." And there's another text message that Baldoni allegedly sent directing his PR team to amplify survivor stories and create a narrative focused on domestic violence to distract from internal issues. In this text message, Baldoni writes, "What is the TikTok strategy? I'd like you guys to start posting me only talking about domestic violence and clips and why this movie is so important." In another text message, he asks for his Instagram DMs to be monitored for survivor stories, texting, "Finding the most emotional and touching content from survivors supporting this film and reposting." Then Jennifer Abel suggested in her message back that they use this strategy. She says in her text message, quote, "Theater surprise, and then I think Survivor content first thing tomorrow a.m., which then will be helpful for the news cycle," unquote. And then more on the alleged retaliation and PR attack. Melissa Nathan celebrated. So Blake Lively's complaint says that in these text messages, which I'm about to read to you, that Melissa Nathan and others celebrated their success in deflecting criticism and shifting public perception, basically making Justin Baldoni, their client, look great and Blake Lively look not so great. So in the text message that Blake Lively highlights in her complaint, Melissa Nathan writes, "The majority of socials are so pro-Justin, and I don't even agree with half of them, LOL." And then she further bragged about shutting down media coverage of on-set HR complaints. In another text message, Nathan writes, quote, "This went so well, it was genius. So, okay, we have the four majors standing down on HR complaint." So it appears at first glance like that, yeah, they were trying to make Justin look good and make Blake look bad. For what reason? I don't know. But Blake is saying this was just to retaliate against me for outcrying about sexual harassment. So it's not looking good at this moment in time for Justin Baldoni and his PR team. Okay, and then we get to the comments that Justin Baldoni allegedly made about Blake Lively's appearance, which she brings up in her legal complaint. So apparently Baldoni texted or communicated with others regarding Lively's appearance, her weight, and her age in ways that she found invasive and degrading. For instance, he secretly contacted her trainer to inquire about her weight, allegedly under the guise of needing to lift her in a scene that didn't exist. This is what Blake is saying. And she says that Baldoni later referred to the trainer as a damn spy when this was revealed. So basically, Blake Lively is saying that Justin secretly reached out to Blake Lively's personal trainer to say, "Hey, dude, how much does she weigh? I have to lift her in a scene." And it all sounds so like terrible and like he shouldn't be asking about her weight. But and then when he found out that the trainer told Blake that he had inquired about her weight, he said that the trainer was a damn spy. We're later going to find out exactly why Justin Baldoni reached out, or at least from his side, about Blake Lively's weight. And you guys can decide, who you believe, and was it not called for? Should he have ever asked about her weight, or was he within his rights to ask about her weight because he has a bad back and there was a lift scene? So we're going to get into that. Lively also says that she raised concerns with Wayfarer and, everybody who worked on the film, the higher ups, about a COVID outbreak on set that impacted her and her infant. And she says that Baldoni and Heath instead focused on the financial impact rather than her and her infant's health of this COVID outbreak. Blake says that Justin Baldoni improvised physical intimacy during scenes without prior notice or consent from Blake. And she says that these improvisations include him biting her lip during takes, which she says he wasn't supposed to do. And in response to her objections, she says that Baldoni said, "I'm not even attracted to you," which again, does not make him look great. But we're going to get into his side in a little bit. So post-complaint filing in late December of 2024, Blake Lively receives public support from collaborators, including Colleen Hoover, the author of the book, as well as Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants co-stars and director Paul Feig. So she's getting support from her, friends and allies in the industry, and they're backing her on her complaint and believing her. And also during this time, after the complaint was filed, Sony Pictures, who is, I think, the distributor of the film, they had played a big role in it, releases a statement supporting Blake Lively. And it's also announced that Justin Baldoni's team is going to be firing back a scathing counter lawsuit against Blake Lively with evidence to show that she's doing the very thing that she is accusing him of doing to her. So he's pissed. So on December 31st, 2024, he does just that. So Justin Baldoni and others, which I'll name later, file a gigantic lawsuit against the New York Times, but not Blake Lively just yet. So she is not named as a defendant in his first lawsuit, but he will later file another one and she is named. But in the lawsuit against the New York Times, he's claiming that there's defamation and misrepresentation. Him and the plaintiffs allege that the article published by the New York Times falsely portrayed them as orchestrating a smear campaign against actress Blake Lively following her complaints about the work environment on the film It Ends With Us. The plaintiffs further claim that the article was based on selectively edited and altered communications provided by Blake Lively, which distorted the context and the facts. The plaintiffs are also saying the lawsuit details how Blake Lively allegedly manipulated events to gain control over the film's production and promote her own interests. These actions include altering the film's script, asserting control over wardrobe and editing process, and demanding a producer credit and a prestigious PGA mark, which is Producers Guild of America mark, which is a certification given to producers who performed a majority of the producing, which to my knowledge, she was not that on this film, but she's demanding that she get the PGA certification or mark. The plaintiffs further claim that the New York Times failed to verify facts or investigate claims made by Blake Lively, rushing to publish a defamatory article that omitted critical evidence, disproving her narrative. They also allege breach of contract agreements. The lawsuit alleges that the false allegations, combined with Blake Lively's control over production and the New York Times reporting, caused professional and reputational harm to Justin Baldoni and the other plaintiffs. The plaintiffs are Justin Baldoni, Wayfarer Studios, LLC, Jami Heath. Other plaintiffs include PR professionals and entities such as Melissa Nathan, Jennifer Abel, Jed Wallace, he's a crisis management specialist, as well as RWA Communications, LLC, and Street Relations, Inc. So there's a bunch of plaintiffs on this lawsuit against the New York Times. The defendants of this lawsuit are the New York Times Company, alleged to have published a defamatory and misleading article. Megan Tohi, she is the reporter for the New York Times who authored the article titled, "We Can Bury Anyone Inside a Hollywood Smear Machine." And Blake Lively is named in this lawsuit. However, she's not named as a defendant, but she is accused of making false claims that spurred the New York Times article. The lawsuit alleges that the New York Times relied heavily on a complaint that Blake Lively filed with the California Civil Rights Department, which was riddled with inaccuracies. Lively's allegations centered around a supposed retaliation campaign by Baldoni and Wayfarer after she raised concerns about harassment and workplace behavior. The plaintiffs argue that text messages referenced in the New York Times article were deliberately edited to portray incriminating intent. For example, and this is big, Baldoni and others' lawsuit against the New York Times alleges that on August 16th of 2024, a text exchange between Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel was cited as evidence of a smear campaign against Blake Lively. However, the lawsuit claims that the earlier parts of the conversation show that Nathan was denying any involvement in planting stories about Blake Lively. So I was just informed that her name is Megan Twohy. So the W, I think, is silent. Baldoni and the other plaintiffs' lawsuit also allege that the use of emojis like the upside-down smiley face emoji was omitted in Blake Lively's complaint, which basically that emoji, they're saying, usually means sarcasm. Like if you put that upside down smiley face emoji at the end of a comment, you're being sarcastic, you're joking. And they're saying that that emoji was omitted in Lively's complaint, which severely changes the tone of the text messages and makes them appear malicious, whereas they were not. And, of course, Baldoni, the other plaintiffs, they totally deny the allegations that Blake made of sexual harassment by Baldoni and Heath. They say that these were sensationalized in the New York Times article. Specific claims include Baldoni allegedly entering Lively's trailer uninvited while she was breastfeeding. However, Text messages from May of 2023 indicate that Lively invited Justin Baldoni to rehearse lines in her trailer while she was pumping milk. So in her complaint, she says, oh my God, he came into my trailer. I was topless. I was breastfeeding and he was uninvited. His lawsuit is saying, oh no, I have a text message. And they show it in his lawsuit. She said, come on in, we can rehearse lines, I'm breastfeeding, like something like that. So she invited him in the trailer, but she's saying, no, he was uninvited and I was uncomfortable. Baldoni and the other plaintiffs also accuse Lively of overstepping her role as an actress and executive producer by taking unilateral control over wardrobe decisions, script revisions, and editing processes. They basically are claiming, the way I take it is like she hijacked the film. Maybe she and her husband, but she sort of came in as the lead actress and got a producer credit, but by all means, just kind of made it her baby and just was very expensive wardrobe items, which, as people say it on TikTok, which is a huge source for information on this, they're like, Lily Bloom in the book could have never afforded $5,000 Louboutins or a Prada purse or whatever, Valentino purse. She was a small business owner, like a flower shop owner. So this didn't make any sense. But Baldoni and the other plaintiffs are saying that Blake demanded these high budget items for wardrobe, which first of all didn't match with the character in the book, which the film was an adaptation of. And also it just kind of blew through their budget. It inflated their budget. They also say that Blake demanded her own version of the film be tested against Justin Baldoni's. Now, let me make this picture clear. Justin Baldoni is part owner in the company that bought the rights to the book in the first place, okay? He's also the film's co-star, leading role, and he's the film's director. And here he's saying the lead actress, who also got a producer credit, is demanding her own version of the film be tested against Baldoni's. Like, hey, let me do my cut, you do your cut, and let's just see what a test audience likes better, which really, in my mind, should never be happening. I'm not in the industry, so I don't really know, but it seems that the director should have most of the say in, okay, this is the cut that I want to use for the film. I don't know why a lead actress and producer would do that. But this is what he's alleging, right? Blake might deny it. And despite her lack of contractual rights to do so, she just railroaded them. Those are my words, not them. And just was like, listen, I'm going to do my own cut and we're going to test it against yours. Now, here's a side note of a clip that I saw of an interview that Blake Lively gave on a red carpet, where she just out of nowhere admitted during this red carpet interview that her husband, Ryan Reynolds, wrote the now infamous rooftop scene in the film, which, to everybody's knowledge, even Sony, the film's distributor, was not aware that Ryan Reynolds was involved in any regard in this film, let alone getting any writing credit or any writing power on this thing. But here's Blake Lively on a red carpet saying, oh, by the way, my husband Ryan's the one who wrote that rooftop scene. Nobody knows that. But now you know. She says something like that, and it's pretty wild.
The iconic rooftop scene in this movie, my husband actually wrote it. Nobody knows that, but you know. But he wrote it. He works on everything I do. I work on everything he does. So his wins, his celebrations are mine, and mine are his.
And so Baldoni is claiming that there was even an email sent by Sony in response to Blake Lively's admission on this red carpet that her husband is writing for this movie that he's not supposed to be involved in. There's no contract that says that he's going to get any writing credit or do any writing on the film. So Sony, the film's distributor, basically points this out in an email. They're like, hey, excuse us. There's nothing in any contract stating that Ryan Reynolds is to be a writer on the film. So even Sony was raising their hand going, something's not right here. Baldoni and the other plaintiffs also accuse Blake Lively of a manipulative behavior. Their lawsuit describes a January 4th, 2024 meeting at Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds' New York penthouse, where Ryan Reynolds allegedly berated Justin Baldoni over unfounded allegations of fat shaming his wife, Blake Lively. And Blake Lively reportedly threatened to withhold promotion of the film unless her demands, such as receiving a producer credit and PGA certification, were met. Now, these are Baldoni and the other plaintiffs' allegations against Blake Lively. Now, here is a bit of a timeline of events according to Justin Baldoni's first lawsuit. And this is the one against the New York Times, because as you'll learn, and you probably already know, he filed another lawsuit subsequent to this, naming Blake Lively as a defendant. But in this lawsuit against the New York Times, he says that May to June of 2023, filming commences. He says that early conflicts arose over the wardrobe, with Blake Lively demanding high-cost items like $5,000 shoes that strained the film's budget. Baldoni says his attempts to address these issues were later mischaracterized as harassment. So he's starting to paint a picture that allegedly there were early conflicts, Blake Lively being an entitled brat, those are my words, saying, well, I want to have, I want to have power and authority over my own wardrobe, even though that was not her role on this film. She starts demanding $5,000 shoes, Valentino purse, all these things, which again, don't really match up with the character in the book. From what I understand, Lily Bloom not really being able to afford things like that. And Baldoni's painting this picture that he tried to question her about it and say like, whoa, excuse me, like this is not the wardrobe that you're supposed to have. And it's also blowing our budget. And then he's basically alluding to the fact that this may have been what motivated Blake to accuse him of harassment. So she's turning the issue onto him. Whereas he's saying she started this issue with the wardrobe stuff and like railroading and trying to take over my film. When I tried to confront her about it, she's like, oh, fuck you, you're harassing me, is what I'm taking from all this. And maybe this is where it all started. Like maybe this really was the start of what would quickly snowball into something so much bigger. Maybe it started out as simple as Blake being an entitled brat saying, I'm going to get this wardrobe. And he's saying, well, I don't want you to. This is not what we intended. And then she's like, you're harassing me. And then it just blew up from there. Now, Baldoni's lawsuit also says that in June to November of 2023, the industry strikes pause filming. So he says that that's when Blake Lively drafted a protections for return to production document with a 17-point list of non-negotiable demands to address alleged inappropriate behavior by Baldoni and Heath. So Baldoni's legal team has said of Blake Lively's 17-point demand letter, they both agree that she sent, they call it inflammatory and an intimidation tactic. So Lively has said, I had to send this letter that if I'm to return to work, you're going to meet these demands for my safety. Like I need to feel safe. You need to sign this and agree to it so that I can feel safe enough to return to work. Well, Baldoni's camp is saying, oh, no. This was an inflammatory letter that had mistruths in it, and it was meant to intimidate me so that I would continue bowing down to her. Long list of demands, her producer credit, her PGA certification, her wardrobe takeover, her wanting to make her own edit of the film, like her own cut, and test it against Baldoni's, the director of the film. So he's saying, yeah, no, this letter, there was no harassment. The letter was not necessary, but she did it as a manipulative tactic to intimidate me and to inflame the situation. Baldoni's lawsuit says that January to February 2024, filming resumes. And he talks about the January 4th, 2024 contentious meeting at Lively's residence, which involved accusations by her husband, Ryan Reynolds, who apparently traumatized Baldoni in his confrontation. So Baldoni is saying he was actually traumatized by this meeting that took place at their New York penthouse, where allegedly Ryan Reynolds kind of got in his face or got angry with him and yelled at him and berated him, and he was traumatized by it. And according to one of the film's producers who was present at this meeting, allegedly, says that, quote, in his 40-year career, he had never seen anyone speak to someone like that in a meeting, while the Sony rep, who I believe was also present at this meeting, mentioned that she would often think of that particular meeting, and her one regret is that she didn't stop Reynolds' berating of Baldoni. So you have two people who were allegedly present at this meeting on January 4th, 2024, at Lively and Ryan Reynolds' New York penthouse. And you have two people who I guess are witnesses to all this saying, yeah, it was bad. Like, I'll never forget it. And I've never seen anything like that in a meeting in my entire career, 40-year career. Ryan Reynolds berated Justin Baldoni, and it was a lot. Inappropriate, all those things, aggressive. Those are my words, not theirs. Baldoni also says February 9th, 2024, filming concludes after months of concessions by Baldoni and Wayfair. So the plaintiffs on Baldoni's side, including Baldoni, are saying, like, we had to make so many concessions to Blake throughout this process. Like, it was probably so exhausting for them, if this is true, meeting all her demands, because you can understand where they might be telling the truth, because it's like she's the bigger star. And also they're so deep into this filming that if they lose the lead co-star, like, Lily Bloom, that's just going to cost everybody their jobs. It's going to cost a lot of money, wasted money, So I think that Baldoni is claiming that, like, we all were just trying to meet her demands so we could get through this film, even though we didn't like it. We didn't agree with it. It blew up the budget and all these things. She overstepped her bounds, yada, yada. But we just really tried to work with her and make all these concessions and just get this filming done, which they did. They did complete the filming, even with all these issues. And August 2024 is when the public backlash began in Baldoni's lawsuit. They say that following promotional events for the film, Blake Lively's tone-deaf marketing efforts, for example, her focusing on her hair care line while discussing domestic violence, which was the subject of the film, drew a lot of public criticism. So they're basically saying, no, Blake Lively did this shit to herself. Like, we did not, our alleged smear campaign against her did not make the public turn on her. She did that herself by being tone deaf in her marketing and interviews concerning this film, and her previous interviews with the reporter Flaw, where she said, congratulations on your little bump, like things like that. Like, there's stuff that resurfaced, and Blake Lively did make those comments and was that person. So they're saying, no, you did that yourself. And Baldoni and the other plaintiffs are saying that Lively allegedly used this backlash, this public backlash that was against her, to blame Baldoni and his team for orchestrating a smear campaign which caused the backlash. And this is really where I think all of this really snowballed and stemmed from. That potentially, like, my running theory, I have a running theory that has a lot of details to it. We'll get into it at the end. But spoiler alert, I think that Blake Lively may be the kind of privileged, entitled person who cannot be the bad guy. She needs to be loved and adored by the public and everyone around her. And that when she started to see the public backlash concerning her treatment of the marketing surrounding the film, her tone-deaf marketing, her previous interview with that interviewer when she said, congrats on your baby bump, like all these things started to resurface. She saw the tides turning against her, and that's when she, and maybe her husband, because I think that he's manipulative as well, they were like, yeah, no, we're not going to be the bad guy. Baldoni's going to be the bad guy, and here's what we're going to do. Like, we're going to shift the tides, and I think that things turned really dark after that, and they started accusing him of things that may not be true, but they're career-ending, maybe potentially life-ending accusations against Baldoni if they're not true and people believe them. So I think that Lively just didn't want to be the bad guy. I think that that's part of where all this stemmed from and started to snowball. But moving on. December 2024, this is when the publication of the New York Times article came out. And so Baldoni not only says that it was defamatory and it was misguided as far as they didn't include all of the text messages, only certain pieces of them. They left out the emoji and the ha 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 at the end of it or something like that. So the tone was misrepresented in the New York Times article. But Baldoni and the other plaintiffs also say that the reporter Megan Twohey from the New York Times requested a comment from Baldoni and the others ahead of her publishing the article, giving them just 14 hours to respond to an article that could be like career ending to them. And then the next day, December 21st, 2024, The New York Times publishes the article nearly 2 hours before the deadline, so only 12 hours after they said, you've got 14 hours to make a comment on this thing. Like, what say you? And then they go and publish it 2 hours before the deadline. And I also heard, I don't know if this is true, that the New York Times contacted them at like 10 o'clock at night and were like, hey, we're giving you 14 hours to respond. Now I need to fact check that. And they're saying, not only is that article defamatory and just shitty, they're like, you didn't give us enough time to comment on something that was like so big that could affect our careers and our reputation in such a major way. All right, so here's where we get into all the text messages again. And Baldoni said, and his, camp says that these text messages between Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel were central to Blake's accusations against Baldoni and Wayfarer, allegedly orchestrating a smear campaign against Blake Lively. And they're saying the New York Times reporting in their article claimed that Nathan and Abel discussed planting negative stories about Lively in the Daily Mail, titled, Is Blake Lively Set to Be Canceled? So Nathan allegedly sent a link to the Daily Mail article to Abel, and Abel responded, wow, you really outdid yourself with this one. So it looks bad at first glance. Like it looks like they're like, ha ha ha, our smear campaign is working against Blake Lively, ha ha ha. And then Baldoni and the other plaintiff's lawsuit also highlights that Nathan reportedly replied to Abel and says, that's why you hired me, right? I'm the best. And the plaintiffs, so Justin Baldoni and the other plaintiffs, they respond to this by saying that this exchange was taken out of context. Earlier in the text conversation, which was omitted by both Blake Lively and the New York Times, they say that Nathan forwarded a screenshot of a message that she'd received from a reporter informing her about the Daily Mail article, to which Nathan's response was, quote, damn, this is not fair because it's also not me. Everything now looks like it's me. So this text message was omitted in Blake Lively's complaint, but it gives a lot of context to the situation. Because now reading this text message, you're thinking, or at least I'm thinking, wait, this is her, Melissa Nathan, the PR crisis specialist, directly denying, like, this was not me planting this story. That was not me. So that was omitted from Blake's complaint. And I think that could have been on purpose, like that, because that wouldn't have made Blake look good. It makes Justin look good. The lawsuit also argues that this shows that Nathan had no role in creating or disseminating that article. Furthermore, Abel's response, quote, you really outdid yourself with this one, was accompanied by an upside-down smiley face emoji, which indicates sarcasm. So the omission of this emoji in the New York Times article fundamentally altered the tone and intent of the exchange, according to Baldoni and the other plaintiffs. And I would agree, if this is accurate and he's showing the full text message, which had an upside-down smiley face emoji at the end of it, to me that does indicate sarcasm. And if Blake Lively in her complaint omitted that emoji, that's a big deal because the context matters. If I send a text and I say, ha ha ha, like I did a good job, ruining your day, and then that's it. It's like, or if I didn't say ha ha, let's say I said, oh, I did such a good job ruining your day. That's just what I wanted. But it's followed by an upside down emoji or a ha ha ha. If that's omitted, you might be like, wow, Jamie's a real bitch. She wanted to ruin this person's day and she did, and she's happy about it. But if you leave that emoji in and you see that followed my text message, well, then you're like, oh, Jamie's being a smartass. So I think the context really matters here. Now, Lively alleges that Baldoni made her uncomfortable by using the word sexy to describe a wardrobe adjustment. She claimed this was evidence of inappropriate behavior. But the plaintiff's response was, there was a text message from Blake Lively sent before the alleged incident, which contradicted her claim. In the text message, Lively referred to her character's wardrobe and wrote, it needs to be much sexier. That's what the character would wear. So she's using the word sexy, but she's saying him using the word sexy made her uncomfortable. The plaintiffs also argue that Baldoni's later use of the term sexy when discussing her wardrobe was in direct response to Lively's own input and was meant as creative direction, not personal commentary. Now we're going to talk about the breastfeeding and the trailer incidents. Lively alleges that Baldoni and Heath entered her trailer uninvited while she was breastfeeding and in a state of undress. She presented this as evidence of harassment, but the plaintiff's response is that there was a text message exchange from May of 2023, which revealed that Lively invited Baldoni into her trailer while she was pumping breast milk. In a message, she wrote, quote, "Come in, we can go over lines while I'm pumping," unquote. So she's inviting him in while she's pumping. And Baldoni and the other plaintiffs say in another text exchange between Nathan and Abel, Nathan reportedly said, "That's why you hired me, right? I'm the best." The plaintiffs argue that this was just sarcastic banter, which was clear when read in the full context of the conversation with nothing left out. The tone was misrepresented in the New York Times article to suggest a conspiratorial tone. The lawsuit also notes that the ha-ha reaction was added to these messages. So you know how you can like firm press or long press on a text if you have an iPhone, and you can do like the ha-ha, emoji or whatever. It's not an emoji, but you can write ha-ha to somebody's text message. Baldoni and the plaintiffs are saying that reaction was on these text messages, which further reinforces the sarcastic nature of the exchange. Justin also points out in his lawsuit that notably, Lively chose not to file a lawsuit, only a complaint, against Baldoni, Wayfarer, or any of the plaintiffs, a choice that spared her from the scrutiny of the discovery process, including answering questions under oath and producing her own communications. This decision was no accident. So they're saying, and I think I happen to agree at this point, now that I've seen both sides, that it was intentional that Blake didn't file a lawsuit, because if she filed a lawsuit, she would be under scrutiny for the discovery process and answering questions under oath, whereas filing a complaint still gets the negative information about Baldoni out there and gets her, first to the jump, to be the first to attack, the first to strike, but without doing it like in a lawsuit that puts her under fire or under oath, let's say. And I don't think that was an accident. I think she filed a complaint and not a lawsuit on purpose. They also say that the Times article also deliberately ignores that Lively's publicist, Leslie Sloan of Vision PR, once backed by Harvey Weinstein, seeded stories critical of Justin Baldoni, including that Baldoni was a sexual predator, ahead of the film's release. So Baldoni's lawsuit alleges that Lively's publicist was planting stories or putting stories out there that he was actually a sexual predator ahead of the It Ends With Us film release. That's pretty wild. That's not something I knew at the beginning of this. The complaint also states that Nathan's firm, this is the PR strategist for Justin Baldoni, was made aware of Sloan planting unfavorable, false, and defamatory stories about Baldoni's Baha'i faith to Page 6, and also planted a false story alleging that there were multiple HR complaints during production. So we're starting to find out if Baldoni and the other plaintiffs are telling the truth in their lawsuit, which they'll have to be questioned about this if it goes to trial, or if there's like a deposition. They're saying, yeah, no, we were not doing the smear campaign. It was Blake and her team putting stories out there that Baldoni is a sexual predator ahead of the film's release. So they're saying, yeah, no, you started it. And I would argue she really started this thing by the New York Times article, because I firmly believe that she is behind giving them the information they needed to publish that article. So she made everything public. She published those. She most likely, in my opinion, gave all those text messages to the New York Times to then go and publish, which did not make Justin Baldoni and others look good. And now, she's trying to say that they're guilty of a smear campaign when in reality, like I think that they're playing her game. Then on January 16th of 2025, so just a couple weeks after he filed his first lawsuit, Baldoni files another lawsuit, and this one is against Blake Lively and her mid-at-best husband, Ryan Reynolds. Sorry, couldn't help myself. The lawsuit alleges control and interference. So the lawsuit now against Lively and her husband is saying This couple allegedly seized creative control over the film, It Ends With Us, making unilateral decisions about wardrobe, script changes, and production processes, causing financial strain and delays. Lawsuit also alleges defamation and a smear campaign. They're saying that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are accused of orchestrating a defamatory campaign against Justin Baldoni, falsely accusing him of sexual harassment to shift public blame for the film's poor reception. So Baldoni is saying that the film was starting to be received not well, mostly on the back of Blake Lively, who was marketing it in a tone-deaf way and also making bad wardrobe decisions, which the press was picking up on and people were like making fun of. So he's saying in his lawsuit, that is what motivated Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively to conspire together and say, we're taking over this film. Like, we're railroading the higher-ups. We're taking over this thing. And he says they did. This lawsuit also alleges extortion and threats. So the plaintiffs claim that Lively and her team issued ultimatums and leveraged their celebrity influence to force changes, sidelining Baldoni and his creative team. He also says that Lively disseminated false narratives about the set culture, including claims of inappropriate behavior to media outlets like the New York Times. So he's saying it was Blake Lively who marketed this thing in a very tone-deaf way and then couldn't take the heat. And so she shifted the blame onto me by going to her PR team and saying, yeah, let's make Baldoni look bad in the press. Let's publish this New York Times article. Let's say that, plant stories that he's a sexual predator, yada, yada. Wow, that's really dark. Baldoni asserts that the public accusations and interference have damaged his personal and professional reputation. So he's saying those are my damages. Overall, the plaintiffs are arguing that Lively's actions undermine the film's mission to honor domestic violence survivors, turning it into a public relations disaster. The lawsuit seeks to clear the plaintiffs' names and hold defendants accountable for alleged defamation, extortion, and professional misconduct. So here's a little bit of a timeline, and then we're going to wrap. I've got some more things to go into this lawsuit. I'll go over my thoughts on this story, what the interwebs, the streets, everybody's saying about this thing, and then we'll wrap it up. But a little bit of a timeline in Justin Baldoni's second lawsuit, which is against Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. He says that the early relationship was off to a promising start when they started filming. He says that December 31st, 2022, Blake Lively agreed to play the lead role of Lily Bloom. He says that she was also granted an executive producer credit as part of her agreement. He says that early on, Justin and Lively exchanged frequent text messages, sharing personal anecdotes, memes, and updates regarding family illnesses. So all was kind of hunky-dory in the beginning. But then he says there were wardrobe issues early on. He says that Lively allegedly took full control over her character's wardrobe, which we talked about earlier, sending hundreds of late-night text messages to costume designers with specific demands. He also says she insisted that her character should have expensive items, like $5,000 shoes, despite the character being portrayed as a small business owner who probably couldn't afford that stuff. He says this caused budget overruns, delays, and wardrobe fittings had to be transported to Lively's Manhattan home at her insistence. Then there's Sony's criticism. He says on the first day of filming, paparazzi captured unflattering photos of Lively in her wardrobe. Baldoni says this drew criticism from Sony, which Baldoni relayed to Lively. He says that Blake Lively later mischaracterized this conversation as a lengthy outburst by Baldoni, during which she claimed he cried in her trailer, an allegation that Baldoni denies. Okay, here's where we're going to get to the dragon influence, and get ready to vomit in your mouth a little bit. So Baldoni alleges that Lively rewrote key scenes, including the pivotal rooftop scene where Ryle and Lily meet for the first time in the movie. Although Lively did later admit that Ryan wrote that scene, which again is bizarre. Anyway, and Baldoni is saying in his lawsuit that Blake Lively summoned Baldoni to her penthouse, where her husband Ryan Reynolds and an unnamed celebrity friend pressured him to accept Blake's version of that scene. So apparently there was like a little war going on about the rooftop scene where it's like, okay, you have the director's cut, which is Baldoni, and apparently Blake is trying to take control and say, no, it should be this way. She allegedly summons him up to her penthouse where Ryan Reynolds and another unnamed celebrity, which we will find out later who that was, were pressuring him to accept Blake's version. And then it's revealed, you can kind of pick up on context clues that unnamed celebrity friend who was allegedly at this meeting was none other than Taylor Swift, which is like Blake's bestie, apparently. That's wild. Taylor Swift has better things to do. All right. Like she has an empire to run, a jet to fly around in. She's got a cat to take care of, like world tours, music to write, guitars to play, collabs with Post Malone. Like I just am so like taken aback by the fact that she was, not the fact, but allegedly was at this meeting going, come on, Justin, you got to take Blake's version of that rooftop scene. Like it's just, I can't. All right, here's where the cringe comes in. Get ready to vomit. Baldoni says that Lively apparently sent a text message after the meeting at her penthouse with Ryan Reynolds and allegedly T Swift, that Lively sent a text message to Justin referring to Ryan Reynolds, her husband, and that celebrity, T Swift, as her dragons. Okay, here's the cringy text message. So Baldoni is saying that Lively sent this text message to him after that meeting with Ryan Reynolds and T Swift present. And this text message is in his lawsuit, so you can read it word for word. The cringy text message that Blake Lively wrote to Justin Baldoni goes like this, quote, if you ever get around to watching Game of Thrones, you'll appreciate that I'm Khaleesi. And like her, I happen to have a few dragons. For better or worse, but usually better. Because my dragons also protect those I fight for. So really, we all benefit from those gorgeous monsters of mine. You will too, I can promise you. First off, she says that she is Khaleesi. Now, I don't watch Game of Thrones, but apparently that's this like, I don't even know, like boss bitch in that show who collects dragons. I don't know. She's probably a main character. And here's Blake saying, I'm Khaleesi. Bitch, I don't know who does that. Like, let other people refer to you as Khaleesi, but don't call yourself Khaleesi. But she did. And this text message comes off as very manipulative to me, just right from the jump. It's like, I could see him going to this meeting with these powerhouse celebrities, T Swift, allegedly, Blake Lively, and Ryan Reynolds. And then you got little old Justin Baldoni, who's just, overpowered. And they're pressuring him to take Blake's version of the rooftop scene. And then she sends this stupid text message that is basically like, I've got dragons and they protect me. And guess what? They'll protect you too. It is just so manipulative, cringy, gross. Like, I don't know how she's going to come back from that. But this text message tells me all I need to know about Blake Lively. And I knew a little bit before all this drama started, and I didn't like what I knew about her, and we'll go over that at the end. But this text message is just, girl, no. And Baldoni also says in his lawsuit there were false allegations of fat shaming. So he says that Baldoni says that he consulted Blake Lively's personal trainer, Dawn, to ask about her weight to safely prepare for a lift scene due to his chronic back injuries, which I do know. It's been well documented that Baldoni does have severe chronic back injuries, issues. And so while, Blake Lively says, oh my God, he body shamed me, he fat shamed me, he asked about my weight, how dare he? He's saying, no, I reached out to her trainer basically to say, like, how much does she weigh? Because I know I'm going to be lifting her and I just want to prepare and work out and get my back strong enough, basically. And Lively and Reynolds allegedly ambushed Baldoni in their penthouse, Reynolds accusing Baldoni of fat shaming his wife using phrases like, how dare you fucking ask about my wife's weight? What's wrong with you? So that's part of the, Baldoni says that, Ryan Reynolds, berated him. And The lift scene was ultimately removed despite its significance of the film. I don't know that to be true. I think it is because I read it, but I haven't watched the film. But there were others, who were at this meeting at the penthouse who say, yeah, Ryan Reynolds was not good. Like, he was not professional. And I will never forget how badly he treated Justin Baldoni at that meeting. There was also the sexual harassment allegations. So after the SAG-AFTRA strike ended in November of 2023, Lively and her legal team issued a 17-point list of non-negotiable demands, which implied inappropriate conduct on the set. These demands included the mandatory presence of an intimacy coordinator, prohibitions on discussing personal experiences related to sex or nudity, no physical touching of Lively, including hugging, or comments on her appearance unless strictly related to the character. Now, Lively alleged that Baldoni added graphic content to the script, such as a scene where her character orgasms, which Baldoni denies. He claims this idea came from the intimacy coordinator, not him. Lively described a birthing scene as being filmed with non-essential personnel present while she was mostly nude, which Baldoni and production documents dispute. Baldoni says that Blake Lively during that birthing scene was wearing black briefs and a pregnancy suit, and the financier she accused of watching the scene was not even on set. Then Lively reportedly accused Baldoni of orchestrating a smear campaign against her after her tone-deaf promotional efforts were widely criticized online. These included promoting her alcohol brand and naming a drink at the premiere after party, Ryle You Wait. So Ryle is the name of Baldoni's character in the movie. So she named this cocktail like, let's call it Ryle You Wait. And it's a reference to the abusive character in the film, which many people found inappropriate. And Baldoni, even though Lively has accused Baldoni of, commenting on her weight, her appearance, Baldoni says that no, Lively even joked about my physical appearance, suggesting that I get rhinoplasty, an insecurity that Baldoni has discussed publicly about his nose. And Baldoni and the other plaintiffs are saying that Lively reportedly worked with the New York Times to leak her sexual harassment allegations in advance of filing her civil complaint, intending to damage Baldoni's reputation. And Baldoni further claims that, and this is backed up with photos, that he was held in a basement at the New York premiere of the film It Ends With Us. Baldoni is the director and star of this movie, and he says Blake forced him and his guests to watch the film in a basement so that they wouldn't be near her. And he has photos of them in the basement. So this is his baby. This is his film. Like, he adapted it from a book to film. He is the director, the co-star, lead in the film, and he's watching it with his guests in a basement at the premiere. And he's saying that was at the order of Blake Lively, who railroaded him and took over his project along with her husband. Subsequent to Baldoni's lawsuits, he released 3 outtakes from romantic scenes in the film, which seemed to show him and Blake acting within the scope of the scene, what the scene called for, at least in my opinion. Both were breaking character as the scene, wasn't going to have any sound. So I watched this clip, some of the clips that Baldoni released, and it shows him and Blake. It's a romantic scene. They're dancing at a bar or a restaurant or somewhere. They're very close to one another. And you can hear them talking about stuff that has nothing to do with the film. And that's because they were just making conversation so that on film it looks like they're talking to each other and maybe flirting, but there was no sound in that particular scene. So they didn't have to say anything off of a script per se. He released that footage to show that this is Blake looking and talking very comfortably with me, and I'm not doing anything wrong. And Blake Lively is claiming that I'm this horrible person, but here we are in these 3, outtakes from romantic scenes that I'm putting out for the world to see. And here we both are, breaking character, being very comfortable, joking with one another. Now, there were some recent updates. A New York judge has set a trial date for this Lively versus Baldoni showdown. The trial date was set for March of 2026, and there's a conference scheduled next week. So there's going to be more updates to this whole thing next week. Now, I personally believe this thing is probably never going to go to trial. I cannot see Blake's team and Ryan Reynolds, like I cannot see them wanting all that smoke, like having to answer questions under oath and have more evidence presented. All right, I'm going to make a prediction. I think this thing's going to settle, and I think that Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are going to pay Justin Baldoni and the other plaintiffs out. That's my guess. The other update is that Lively filed in a Texas court a request to depose Jed Wallace, who is a crisis management specialist who she says was central to turning the public against her. I also do know that her legal team has made 3 attempts to silence somebody named Brian Freeman, and I think he's an attorney for Baldoni and also maybe a producer on the film. And they're trying to get a gag order, and I don't think they've been successful just yet, but they're trying. And Blake and Ryan were seen recently after, like, Blake wasn't seen for about a month after all this drama hit, the shit hit the fan. She was kind of like, seemed like she was in hiding. But she and her husband Ryan were seen for the first time in a month, reuniting with Blake's former co-star, Michelle Maroney or Marone. There's a pic on Maroney's IG story. I don't know who this person is, but I know she's a co-star, previous co-star of Blake's. All right. What are the interwebs and the streets saying? And also, what am I saying about this? Like, we're just going to, let's talk about it. So at first, it seemed like most people, myself included, were on Blake's side. Like, I believe women, and this just sounded really dark and gross on Justin's part. Like, it seemed like he was a terrible person. And I was squarely on, team Blake Lively. However, there were some things that I knew about her that I did not like leading up to this drama. Like I said, I don't follow a lot of film stars and I don't watch a lot of movies, but I did know that she and Ryan, Freudian slip, got married on a plantation. I think it was back in it was like 8 years ago or so. And there's 2 things, okay? That's bad. And you should never want to get married on a plantation knowing what all has gone on there. It's just terrible, terrible, terrible events in our history. And, but some people say, listen, that was years ago. They've apologized for it and maybe they weren't aware and all these. So I'm willing to note that, but look beyond it. But then she also continued to support Balenciaga after we all saw their marketing ads, which were gross, which depicted very young children, toddlers, in not so great ways. And you can read between the lines of what I'm saying. So I just don't understand how anybody would support Balenciaga. But here's Blake Lively wearing Balenciaga, still supporting him. And I didn't like that. I'm judging her for that. And then there's also the fact that she supports Woody Allen, and that's gross to me. Here she is accusing a man of sexual harassment. And later, I believe her team even called him like a sexual abuser in subsequent reports, which is even a step further. And at the same time, she supports Woody Allen, who has been accused by his own adoptive daughter of SA. And he also began a relationship with his other adoptive daughter. So that's 2 adoptive daughters. One is accusing him of SA. The other one he goes on to marry, leaves his wife for her, and is in a relationship with his adoptive daughter. And I can't remember how old she was when it started, but there was a gigantic age gap. And just gross that you are a father figure to her. I assume you helped raise her. You adopted her, and then you go on to marry her. And I don't know if there are other allegations. I don't want to make false claims, but there's a lot of smoke on Woody Allen. Let's just say that. And Blake loves him, apparently, because she just praises him. She did one of his movies. She supports him, but yet you want us to support you, which I usually do when you're outcrying about sexual harassment and mistreatment by a man, but you support Woody Allen at the same time. So take that however you will. But then the tides shifted and my mind changed as well. I was no longer firmly on Blake's side. I now am more thinking that it seems really likely, like very likely, that she and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, did railroad this movie, did make some false accusations, and didn't want to take the heat that was coming down on Blake for her own actions, like acting like an asshole in interviews and being tone deaf in her marketing of the film. Baldoni came in hot with his 2 lawsuits and so many receipts. If you read her complaint and his lawsuits, you get sort of the full picture of what's going on here. And it's up to you guys to decide, everybody to each their own. But I have read through it, and I think that it is very likely that Baldoni is telling the truth and that Lively and Ryan Reynolds are not good people. Now, there's a money grab theory, okay? So the money grab theory goes that due to the huge financial success of the film, It Ends With Us, it grossed $350 million and it only cost $25 million to make. The money grab theory is that, like, if the film gets picked up for a part 2, and I'm told that that was already in the works before all this drama started, that Blake is the bigger star and with the better reputation. So in theory, she would be chosen to star and produce over Justin in part 2. So if her and Reynolds, her husband, are able to successfully take over this film, well, then they will rake in all the dough, and Baldoni will not, because he's not going to appear in part 2. She would. So that's one theory. There's also the Ryan Reynolds is the bad guy theory, and this is pretty much where I'm at. That theory goes that Ryan is a controlling and jealous husband, and that he basically is the mastermind behind all of this, and he's sort of like the puppeteer, and Blake is placating to her husband, and that doesn't excuse her alleged behavior, but that he's the bad guy. And let me give a little context to that. So backing up a little bit, there's this weird interview that Ryan conducted where, along with his mom and Hugh Jackman, all separately, with one of the guys who plays earlier on love interest of Blake Lively in the film It Ends With Us. Now, why Ryan Reynolds, this huge star, this Deadpool guy, this, multimillionaire Mint Mobile guy, why he's conducting an interview for his wife's movie is beyond odd, because he's supposed to have nothing to do with this movie. But that is evidence to me that he's conducting this interview with one of Blake's co-stars, that he has inserted himself into this thing. We also know in this complaint that Blake Lively filed, and also in other, the lawsuit of Baldoni, that Ryan Reynolds was visiting the set often. And now Blake Lively says that was to protect her and, watch over her. But I gotta believe that the Deadpool guy, Mint Mobile guy, has better things to do than to just peruse the set of his wife's film for no good reason. Not no good reason, but I just feel like that's, again, evidence of him kind of wanting to have something to do with this film and putting his nose where it doesn't belong. And maybe Ryan got jealous. Okay, let's just go with this theory that Ryan's the bad guy. Maybe he got jealous. Maybe Blake and her co-star, Justin Baldoni, had mad chemistry, which it looks like they might have. He starts visiting the set. He's like, in his jealous mind, he's going to visit the set and be like, I'll put a stop to this. Let me go to my wife's, movie set and just see how things are going with her and her sexy co-star. And then he edges, and then he's gets so pissed off, he probably sees the chemistry, maybe he gets jealous, and then he edges Baldoni out of his own film and his talent agency, because let's not forget that Justin got dropped by WME, his talent agency, and a lot of people are speculating that that was Ryan Reynolds and or Blake Lively, who are also represented by that same talent agency, maybe going to them saying, hey, it's us or him. So who do you think WME is going to keep under that scenario? Are they going to keep the bigger fish or the small guy? They're going to keep the bigger fish and let the small guy go. A lot of people are speculating that that's what happened. I don't know. Maybe they dropped him for their own reasons, but it's all a little sus. And a lot of people are saying too, maybe Blake caught feelings for Justin and that pissed off her husband and everything spurred from there. I don't know. I don't have enough information to go with that theory. I mean, I think it's entirely possible. But I don't know. And like I said before, I disliked Blake Lively before all this. Ryan was just, whatever. I've never seen any of his films. I don't care. I don't think he's special. Sorry to sound like a bitter Betty. I really just don't think, they were not on my radar. But I disliked Blake and Ryan, for my own reasons, because there was some just problematic behavior that I don't fuck with. That's just me. But I absolutely was on Blake's side at first, because as I said earlier, my instinct is to always believe women. But then the stories started coming out about Blake making false accusations against others. So then I started seeing some stories on TikTok mostly where people who'd previously worked with Blake in some regard, like maybe they were, craft services, or maybe they were wardrobe, maybe they were a producer, blah, 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 whatever. And there's this one lady who told a story of and she seemed super credible. And she's like, listen, I also had an experience with Blake and I got fired over it. And she says something like, Blake also made a false accusation about me, saying that I was making her uncomfortable on set because I treated her too much like I was too much like a fan. And so then I had to be ousted from working on the film. And that's a false accusation because I wasn't behaving that way. These are my own words, but that's how I took it. And there's all these stories, it seems, that people are coming forth and saying, I know Blake, I worked with her. And it doesn't seem like a single one of them are good. And then there's also stories, people who used to work with Ryan who've done interviews since saying, I'll never work with that guy again. So there's stuff coming out about Ryan and Blake that's not painting them in a good light. But I have yet to see any stories that were like, oh, Justin Baldoni is a terrible guy, I would never work with him. Now, listen, there might be stories out there that are opposite to what I just said, and I just haven't seen them. But I'm just telling you what I have seen and not seen on my feed. And then I think this is the last thing that we're going to touch on, but the ScarJo of it all. So in December of 2010, Scarlett Johansson and Ryan Reynolds ended their marriage because they were together before he was with Blake Lively. Sources say that Scarlett initiated the split. They also say the same month that they ended their relationship, there were rumors of toxicity that seemed like both teams were trying to make the others look bad. Us Weekly had an article that made Ryan look like a sad, heartbroken, guy, while making Scarlett Johansson look immature. And Ryan has apparently said that Scarlett Johansson treated him poorly. And Scarlett was allegedly worried about Ryan's relationship with Green Lantern co-star Blake Lively. Someone who worked with them on the movie saw that the two of them, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, were eating dinner together, and it looked like a date. And this is all while he was married to Scarlett Johansson. So a lot of people are speculating that Blake Lively stole ScarJo's man. And then there's that element to it. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but it has been reported that way. And people have speculated that. Listen, I'm open to any of these parties being the asshole or the bad guy. It could be one of them, two of them, all of them. It could be any of those scenarios, but I am heavily, heavily leaning toward Blake and Ryan are the assholes here. And the way that I look at it is I was a juror on a first-degree murder trial, and the judge tells you, you need to use your own critical thinking skills. You just need to use your own instincts to tell whether a witness on the stand is lying, if they're credible, if they are not, or telling the truth. And you also need to weigh all of the evidence together in totality. So, for example, if you're, a juror on a trial and there's two pieces of, circumstantial evidence, well, that's not a very strong case. And you might be like, there's enough reasonable doubt here, I am not going to convict. But if you're on the jury and you're seeing 10, 15, 20 pieces of circumstantial evidence that are pointing toward guilt, well, then you're like, you know what? Now all of a sudden we have a really strong case. Let's go ahead and convict this person on these 20 pieces of circumstantial evidence that say he's guilty. That's the way I'm looking at this situation. I have looked at both the complaint. I've looked at the complaint, the two lawsuits. I've looked at everything. And I've watched a bunch of videos, interviews, blah, blah, blah. For everything I know, it seems to me that most of the evidence points toward Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds not being good people, making false accusations and railroading this film and trying to make Justin look bad and just being the winners in all of this. That is the way I see it, but I am totally willing to be wrong. And if any new information comes out, I will plug it into the computation in my brain and I will carry the two. Math is mathin', and maybe it'll change my brain. Maybe it'll change my mind. I'm open to that. But I do think that Ryan is the mastermind. Blake is placating to him, but still terrible. And Justin Baldoni is mostly innocent in all of this. Thanks so much for listening and watching. This was a long one, but I hope that you now have a good understanding of this entire It Never Ends With Us saga. Make sure you're following Murderish, my podcast. It's available in any podcast player. And make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Jami on Air. That's Jami on Air. All of the DREADlines with Jami episodes live on my YouTube channel, as well as on the Murderish podcast feed. And remember, violence is an epidemic, so be that bitch when it comes to your safety. Leave your lights on at night, your doors and windows locked, and never leave your drinks unattended at a bar or restaurant. Stay safe out there. See you next time.